This is an ad by BetterHelp. BetterHelp recently surveyed over 16,000 people and found that while 75% of people believe it's wise to seek support, only 27% of Americans are in therapy, and people stay silent to avoid being judged. BetterHelp has over 10 years of experience matching you with the right therapist. Because we're all better with help. Visit betterhelp.com/stopthestigma for their first ever State of Stigma report, the latest in mental health research.
Hey there, this is Alexis Knight. If you did the crime, be ready to do the time. Isn't that how it goes? Well, today's case isn't your run-of-the-mill criminal story. It's messy, it's complicated, and it raises some serious questions about personal responsibility, systemic failures, and the breaking point that every person has, no matter how strong they seem on the outside. I want you to think about something just for a second. Imagine your life falling apart, piece by piece. You can't catch a break, your health is failing, and the system that is supposed to help you, it's failing too. You try to get the care you need, you try to get the insurance that you've been paying for, but the doors are closed. The paperwork piles up, and you are left behind. You feel the weight of it all, day after day. And now imagine that pressure building up in ways you can't even process. Every day you are trying to make sense of this, but it's overwhelming. And the worst part? You're stuck in a system designed to protect you. So they said, but instead, it is suffocating you. What happens when someone reaches their breaking point? We like to think that the people who cross that line are somehow different than the rest of us, right? There's something wrong with them. But are they that different? Are they just like any of us, but maybe pushed too far by forces they could not control? Well, today I'm going to take you into the case of Luigi Mangione, the man who shot and killed Brian Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. BetterHelp recently surveyed over 16,000 people and found that while 75% of people believe it's wise to seek support, only 27% of Americans are in therapy, and people stay silent to avoid being judged. BetterHelp has over 10 years of experience matching you with the right therapist. Because we're all better with help. Visit betterhelp.com/stopthestigma for their first ever State of Stigma report, the latest in mental health research.
Outside a hotel in New York City. It is a tragedy, no doubt about it. But what was it that led this young man, Luigi, to pull the trigger? Was it the man himself? Somehow a bad apple? Or was it a perfect storm of personal frustration and systemic failure? We're going to dig deep into Luigi's life, his struggles, and his growing desperation. And we're going to talk about the way that the healthcare system, an industry that makes billions, how it fails people in ways that are so subtle, so insidious, that most people don't even realize it's happening. They don't even believe it or want to believe it. But that is the thing about pressure. It doesn't always show on the outside, and the people feeling it oftentimes do feel alone. Like they can see something that no one else is paying attention to. And let's be clear, this is not an episode where we're offering answers here. What happened on that cold day in December of this year, 2024, is not simple. It's a layered, complicated tragedy, and it forces us to confront a larger question. Where does responsibility truly lie? Is it with the person who snapped? Or is it with the system that slowly suffocated them? What happens when we can't tell where the pressure came from, and we are not sure who's really to blame? Stick with me, guys. This is not going to be an easy ride, but we're going to peel back the layers. We're going to look at both sides, and we're going to see if we can make sense of a story that's not just about one man's crime. It's about a system that made that crime almost inevitable. So buckle up, because this is Alexis Knight Investigates, and we are about to dive into a case that's going to make you think twice about where the real responsibility lies. All right, now that we have set the stage, let's talk about the man at the center of this tragic event, Luigi Mangione. To many, he was just another face in the crowd, a young guy in his 20s. Didn't stand out much in the public eye. But as we start peeling back the layers, we see that Luigi wasn't just another ordinary person. His life was anything but simple, and his mental and emotional state had been unraveling long before this shooting. Luigi was a competitive surfer, if you didn't know, a young man who had dreams of making it big. But in 2023, a surfing accident left him with a debilitating back injury. This sounds like a typical story, right? Or could be. That freak accident that leads to so much pain.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. BetterHelp recently surveyed over 16,000 people and found that while 75% of people believe it's wise to seek support, only 27% of Americans are in therapy, and people stay silent to avoid being judged. BetterHelp has over 10 years of experience matching you with the right therapist. Because we're all better with help. Visit BetterHelp.com/StopTheStigma for their first ever State of Stigma report, the latest in mental health research.
And suffering. But this wasn't some random injury. This was the beginning of something much darker in this case. A botched surgery follows that left him with even more pain. And that pain turned from something physical to something psychological, something emotional. And now this is where things get interesting. Luigi didn't just deal with his injury the way most people would, by getting through it, finding other ways to cope. He found himself instead caught in a battle with the very healthcare system that was supposed to help him. The insurance company, UnitedHealthcare, it wasn't offering him the support he needed. You see, the insurance policies he'd been paying for, well, they didn't cover the treatment he required, and they denied him at every turn. So now what does a person do? There's no justification here, by the way, but we need to ask this question. What does a person do when their life is being crushed under the weight of their own pain and a system that seems to not give a damn? Luigi did try to get the help he needed. He appealed, he filled out all the forms, he fought for treatment. But what did he get? Rejection after rejection. Phone call after phone call that led nowhere. Luigi wasn't just fighting to recover from an injury, he was fighting against a wall built by a corporation that was more focused on profits than people. And the more he fought, the more that wall grew taller. So then it wasn't just about the physical pain anymore, because it changes, right? Now, it's the isolation Luigi seems to have to be in with everything he's going through. The feeling that no one cared. That's what it seems to be for him. He's not getting any answers. He's not getting any help. The sense of being abandoned by a system that was supposed to protect him. He's looking at his whole life. He was angry at the people who ran the system. And who were those people? Well, Brian Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, was at the top of that list. To Luigi, Thompson wasn't just the head of a company. He was the embodiment of everything that was wrong with the healthcare system and industry. Now, before we go any further, let's take a step back. It's easy to see Luigi as just a man who snapped, a man who let his frustration boil over. And in some ways, that is true, isn't it? But is it the whole story? Or is this a case of a person who was pushed relentlessly by a system that ignored his needs and ultimately drove him to the edge? Now let's talk about that system. Because while we can point to Luigi's actions and say he is responsible for what he did, right? But we also can't ignore the bigger picture. The reality is, healthcare in this country, the United States, it's a complicated beast, and in many ways it is broken. It's a system that's built on profits, where insurance companies control who gets treated and who doesn't. A system where people, real human beings, are reduced to numbers and policy codes and data points. And Luigi, he was one of those numbers. Now take a moment to just think about this. How many of us have been frustrated by the healthcare system? How many of us have sat on the phone for hours with customer service reps, only to be told our claims were denied or our treatments weren't covered? It is maddening. What happens when that frustration turns into something much more dangerous? What happens when the system doesn't just fail you? It pressures you until you break. And that's where Luigi found himself. He was a man who had been let down by the very system he was relying on to survive, live his life. The healthcare industry is often hailed as a pillar of society. But for people like Luigi, it became a source of pain and resentment and ultimately despair. He wasn't just looking for pain relief anymore. This guy was looking for justice. But there's one problem. When you are up against a billion-dollar corporation, finding justice, it just doesn't come easy. And that's where Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, became the focus of Luigi's anger. Thompson wasn't just a CEO anymore, a man at a job. He became the face of everything that was wrong with the system. Well, let's dig into it. UnitedHealthcare, a giant in the healthcare industry, health insurance industry, had the power to change Luigi's life. But instead of helping him, they rejected all of his appeals. They denied all of his claims, and they ultimately left him to suffer. Now, at what point does the system stop being an abstract idea and become something personal? For Luigi, that moment came when he realized that no matter what he did, the system was never going to give him what he needed. The fight was rigged from the start, and in a way, Thompson, sitting at the top of the corporate ladder, he became the embodiment of that rigged system. But then here's where things get blurry. Luigi's actions were extreme. There's no denying this. And they were not justifiable, no matter how much we sympathize with his situation. But when a person is pushed to the point where they feel they have no other options, and we know this about people in today's world, don't we? Where they are faced with a system that continuously rejects them. Doesn't some of the blame have to go to the people who make those systems, knowing it's wrong, knowing you will push people that are hurting and in pain with lives changed from accidents, injuries, diseases? So at what point does the responsibility shift from the person who pulls the trigger to the system that forced their hand, or so it would seem? Companies know they are pushing people. Is it reckless? All right, well, now let's take a step back once again and ask ourselves something important. All right, guys, we're in 2024. It's nearly 2025. And we understand the psychology behind human behavior better than ever before. We already know what happens when people are pushed to their limits. We already know that when people are faced with repeated rejection, overwhelming financial strain, and constant obstacles, that their mental and emotional resilience can start to crack. Okay, but here's the bigger question. If we know this, why are we allowing it to happen from companies in this way? Why aren't we holding companies accountable for creating these systems that push people to their breaking points? These companies, whether they are insurance giants like UnitedHealthcare or any other corporation that provides a necessary service, have a responsibility to the people they serve. They're not supposed to be profit machines that leave individuals to fend for themselves. And yet that is exactly what happens here. Over and over again, people like Luigi are forced to jump through hoops, only to be told the care they need, it's just out of reach. They're not going to get it. And this is much more than just bad customer service. Can we at least agree on that? It's a systemic issue that puts people's lives at risk. People are dying. So what can be done to hold these companies accountable? Well, for starters, there needs to be more transparency in the healthcare industry. This is kind of starting. We need clear, concise explanations for why people's claims are denied. People shouldn't have to go through multiple levels of bureaucracy just to get a simple answer. But it doesn't stop there. Insurance companies need to be forced to face the consequences when they fail to live up to their own promises. We know that systems like these can break people. We've seen it before. We've learned so much. Give me a break, people. You know people get pushed to their edge. And when a person is broken, when they have fought for so long and have been ignored for so long, at what point do we start holding the companies accountable for the role they play in pushing someone like Luigi over the edge because they know it's happening? Is it reckless for these companies to operate without taking into account the psychological toll they're exacting on their customers? Because again, they know they are. Is it not their responsibility to protect people from that kind of suffering? Instead of caring for someone's illness, they're creating illness. And let's be honest here, this isn't just about Luigi, right? And that is why you're seeing the public opinion reaction so extreme on both sides with this guy. This is a problem that affects millions of people every single day. People who feel unheard, who are ignored and desperate. How many others have been denied care and pushed to the brink? Because they're out there, guys. They're out there. And are they one step away from being pushed to the brink? How many are close to losing control with that one last phone call to customer service? And this question is not why. It's not only about why Luigi did what he did. It's why our system allows for people to be pushed to that breaking point in the first place when they know all about it. Is it reckless? Should they be held accountable? At this point, it's clear that Luigi didn't just wake up one day and decide to shoot Brian Thompson. This was the result of months, years of mounting frustration, helplessness, and a growing sense of betrayal. And if we're being honest, it's hard not to understand why Luigi felt the way he did. This wasn't some irrational, spontaneous act of violence. No, this was a calculated decision made in the heat of years of suffering and anger. Because that is what happened. After being rejected time and time again, Luigi didn't just retreat into silence. He wrote. He started writing letters and manifestos, and we all know how that goes. And while they didn't seem like anything more than the ramblings of a desperate man, they're a window into his mind. He was not just angry at his physical pain anymore. He was angry at a system that, in his eyes, was responsible for causing his pain. And in that anger, Brian Thompson the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, became a symbol for everything that was wrong. To Luigi, Brian wasn't just a man, he was the face of an entire industry that had failed him. But at what point do these grievances, these deep-rooted frustrations, turn into something more dangerous? How do we draw the line between someone who is simply venting and someone who's about to act on their anger? Luigi's actions were extreme. There is no doubt about that. But we also cannot ignore the fact that he was trapped in a situation where the system wasn't just failing him, it was actively crushing him. And here's where the psychology becomes so complicated. This isn't a clear-cut story of a bad guy and a victim. No, this is about a man who was pushed into a corner by the very system that was supposed to help him. And when you're in that position, when you're up against a system that doesn't care about your suffering, what are your options? What is the breaking point? As we've seen, Luigi Mangione didn't just fall victim to a random series of unfortunate events. This guy was pushed. His suffering, his anger, it all stemmed from a system that failed him at every turn. And that brings us to a larger question. When will we hold corporations accountable for not just the physical harm that they cause, but also the psychological and emotional damage they inflict on individuals like Luigi? It's happening every day, and when pushed too far, doesn't end well. Take a look at what's happening in the food industry, okay? Our president-elect, Trump, has pushed for investigations into food companies that are, in his view, poisoning us with unhealthy processed products. Now, this is not a political thing, and I don't want to go there. What I'm bringing this up for, why I'm bringing this up, is because people have been wronged by the food industry and have gotten very sick. And Trump wants to hold the people making these items accountable because they are knowingly giving people food items that are not good for them. Look how fast they pulled the Lunchables. That was immediate, not fit for child consumption. I think even they said human consumption, I'm not sure, but wow, that was instant. And so the step for companies becoming accountable for what they're giving us, it's happening. If we're going to upset our gut, if we're going to give ourselves diseases, and just now finally start holding the companies accountable that tell us their food is healthy, and it isn't, what about things like this? You think you have health care, your life is in a company's hands, but what if it isn't? What if you are like Luigi? Does this situation compare to, say, what the president-elect is trying to do with the food? Let's talk about this just a little bit more for a minute. This is not just about rejecting claims or denying treatments. This is about the psychological toll that this has on a person who is fighting for their health, sometimes their life. How many people feel helpless and hopeless and ultimately broken by the system? This isn't just a business model, this is emotional manipulation. This is presenting you with a product that isn't going to really happen to you. A person like Luigi isn't just fighting for his physical well-being. He's fighting to maintain his sense of self, his dignity, his very sanity. And when the system repeatedly rejects him, what is left? What happens when you've been ignored, dehumanized, and forced to fight for everything that you absolutely need in a world that seems more concerned with profits than people? And we could say, well, Luigi is in charge of his emotions and he has a responsibility there, and he certainly does. I'm not saying he doesn't, but when you're knowingly, psychologically manipulating someone, pressuring them, and it's pressuring them against their livelihood, and you're doing it knowingly, do you bear any responsibility for the outcome of that person finally falling apart? Here's the thing. Emotional and psychological harm can be just as deadly as physical harm. And we are learning this. It's very obvious in the world today. We know this, and we need to be responsible for knowing it. In fact, the two are often intertwined, right? Emotional, psychological harm, and physical harm. Just like the food that poisons our bodies over time, emotional distress from these companies poisons the mind, and it can slowly erode someone's ability to cope or to think clearly or to function normally. When a person is pushed to the edge of their mental and emotional capacity, it doesn't matter how strong they seem on the surface, because everyone has a breaking point. Even you, even me. The question is, when will we, as a society, acknowledge that this kind of harm, this mental anguish, is just as lethal as any other form of abuse? Abuse is just abuse. And here's where things get even more troubling. We know the psychological effects of stress, and isolation, and rejection. We also know that our healthcare companies know all about that too, because when people are pushed, they're the ones providing you that care as well, supposedly. We know how companies like UnitedHealthcare, with their massive power and influence, can control who gets access to life-saving care. But what happens when these companies take that power one step further? When they begin to control not just our health, but our sense of worth and stability? When does their responsibility go beyond profit margins? And why, after everything we know about the toll this kind of thing takes on human beings, are they still allowed to operate this way? And let's talk about something else that's not often discussed, something you may not even realize. The glaring disparity between the healthcare that everyday people receive and the healthcare that our government officials have access to. It is no secret that people in positions of power, whether they're lawmakers or high-ranking government employees, they don't have to worry, like Luigi, about being denied the care they need. They don't have to fill out endless forms. They don't have to fight with insurance companies to get any treatment they need that could literally save their lives. Why is that? That's because they have access to the best health care available, often for just a very little cost, oftentimes for free. This is the same system that routinely denies coverage to ordinary citizens like Luigi. It's the same one that ensures government officials never have a situation like Luigi. They always get the care they need. And you know what? This is part of the problem. It's this dual system, one for the elites, the other for the rest of us. Your illness isn't as important. This situation fuels the frustration and anger of people who are left to navigate a broken system. And everyone is a part of this. And oftentimes people are aware this is happening, but when it's not affecting them, it's easier to look away. What if your health was on the line, but you knew that your mayor could get exactly what you need if he needed it? I mean, when people like Luigi are able to see that government officials, because it's happening right in front of all of you, that the very people who help shape the healthcare policies, they don't have to suffer the same fate as someone like Luigi did. It's not just frustrating. It is infuriating. This unfairness is exactly what pushes people to their breaking point, feeling helpless in a system that's rigged against them. But okay, Now that we've explored the psychological and emotional toll this system takes on individuals like Luigi, it's time to ask another hard question. What are the legal and moral responsibilities of corporations like this? We all know that legal responsibility is usually tied to direct actions, right? Now, in this case, Luigi's actions, the shooting of Brian Thompson, it's undeniably criminal. There's no excusing this. No matter the circumstances, this is the law. But, and this is key, can we say that the company that denied him the care he needed, can we say that UnitedHealthcare, even though it was buried in a policy somewhere, the whole system it represents is blameless in all of this? Just like the food companies, and we're going to see it happen. They're going to be scrutinized. They're already scrambling. Like I said, Lunchables, they're gone. They are being scrutinized for the health issues they are causing. They're causing you to have them and many other people. And if we're going to go after food companies who are knowingly allowing for this kind of harm, which, by the way, directly feeds into the healthcare system and all those lovely medications, I mean, shouldn't corporations like UnitedHealthcare be held responsible for the emotional and psychological toll that they exact on their customers? Why isn't there more accountability for companies that consistently push people to their limits, knowing full well the strain it places on their mental and emotional well-being? That is undeniable. It's easy to say that the person who acts out, they're the ones solely responsible. That would be Luigi. But what about the entities that pushed them over the edge? It's not just about lawsuits or fines. Our laws are very rigid. They don't account for a lot of the psychological stuff in our world, and this isn't either. This is about a broader cultural shift. When are we going to start holding companies accountable for the long-term harm they inflict on human beings? It is reckless. And I'm not just talking about physical harm. We've learned over the years, emotional abuse may in fact be harder on a human being than physical abuse. I'm talking about the emotional devastation that happens when a person's life, and literally their life, is controlled by a system that completely refuses to acknowledge their humanity. Maybe, just maybe, it's time to start looking at corporations in the same way we've started looking at food companies, as entities that need to be held responsible because they're causing harm and they're knowingly doing it. And not just the physical harm, the emotional and psychological damage they cause as well. We've seen people have to be accountable for this kind of damage in a courtroom. What about corporations? Why are they allowed to knowingly damage human beings, look away, and not face any consequences? Knowingly. If someone walked up to you and socked you in the face this morning, you might have wanted to have something to say about that and hold them accountable. But if they poison your gut, you don't want to say anything. And if the guy next door can't get his health care, we can all look away. So where does that leave us? At the end of the day, Luigi Mangione's actions were tragic. They were criminal. They were also a result of deep frustration and anger and despair. A person pushed to their breaking point by a system that should have been there to help. We can't deny that Luigi's actions were extreme, but we also cannot ignore the larger systemic issues that contributed to this crime. His breakdown, the psychological and emotional toll of living in a healthcare system that repeatedly lets you down, can be just as damaging as physical harm. And yet companies like UnitedHealthcare continue to operate with minimal accountability for the damage they knowingly cause. We live in a world where some people have access to the best healthcare without question, and then the rest of everyone else left to fight for their lives. That unfairness, that unequal treatment, is what drives people to their limits. And when people like Luigi see that system with its double standards and hidden inequalities, it's no wonder they snap. We've reached a point where we need to ask, when will we start holding these corporations accountable? Not just for the physical harm they cause, but for the emotional and psychological devastation they inflict as well. It's time to stop ignoring the damage that these companies, these systems are causing. It's real, life and death. It is time for change, not just in healthcare, but in the way we treat people who are struggling, in the way we acknowledge the toll that this constant rejection takes on their well-being. Because as we've seen in this tragic case and others, when you push a person too far, the consequences are far-reaching. Thank you for joining me on another chaotic ride through the world of real-life crime. Stay safe out there, guys. Keep asking the difficult questions and always dig for the truth. Until next time, this is Alexis Knight.